Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on collaborative opportunities for minority serving institutions to work with the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Fish. We're very excited to have you here today, and thanks so much for taking your time to join us for this webinar. My name is Dr. Stephen Reichley. I'm the Deputy Director for the Fish Innovation Lab, and I'll be moderating today's event. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. As we go through some of these notes and begin the presentation, if you would please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and what institution that you're joining from. That would be great and a fantastic way for everyone here to get to know each other. As a note, there will be time for Q&A after the presentation. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible during this webinar. We'll also have an opportunity for everyone to submit questions, and we'll post the responses to those questions as on our website as part of the official Q&A process for this request for application, which we'll see later on in the presentation, go over more details with that. So, but if you do have questions during the presentation, please go to the bottom of the Zoom and input the question in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, so we can have those. So feel free to put the questions in throughout the presentation, and we'll have those, and we'll have time to go over those at the end of the presentation. So with that, it is my pleasure now to turn the floor over to Dr. Mark Lawrence, the Director of the Fish Innovation Lab, to start us off. Over to you, Dr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Stephen. And I want to welcome you all and thank you all for joining us in today's webinar. And I hope it's very informative and useful for all of you. So my name is Mark Lawrence, and I serve as the director of the Fish Innovation Lab. I'm a professor at Mississippi State University College of Veterinary Medicine and the Global Center for Aquatic Health and Food Security. To get us started today, I would like to first introduce you to Dr. Terrell Cahan, who serves as the USAID Agreement Officer's Representative for the Fish Innovation Lab. Terrell serves as a Senior Agriculture Advisor in the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security at USAID. He manages multiple terrestrial and aquatic livestock research partnerships with universities and international agricultural research organizations that work to develop and scale evidence-based solutions to agricultural and food security challenges around the world. He also provides technical advice on food security programming, strategy development, and agricultural research and innovation. Terrell is trained as a veterinarian, board certified as a diplomate of the American College of Veterinary Preventive Medicine, and has a master's in development practice. Terrell?
Thanks, Dr. Lawrence, and thanks to the Fish Innovation Lab team for hosting this informational webinar. I also like to thank each and every one of you that has joined us today and are interested in partnering with the Fish Innovation Lab to deploy the power of science and innovation to alleviate poverty, hunger, and malnutrition through sustainable aquaculture systems. The updated Global Food Security Strategy, which underpins the U.S. government's Feed the Future initiative, laid out a set of present-day challenges that are threatening our ability to achieve a prosperous, food-secure world for all. Those challenges include conflict, increasing social inequity, and the climate. Although there has been progress made over the years, poverty and food security are complex, sometimes intractable challenges in and of themselves. And when amplified and exacerbated by urgent crises like social upheaval and extreme weather events, addressing those challenges become even more difficult. For Blue Foods in particular, there has also been significant progress. The increase in production of aquatic animals is said to be outpacing world population growth, largely due to increasing aquaculture production. And we are eating more aquatic foods than ever before. However, there is still more work to be done for the aquatic sector to become more sustainable, inclusive, efficient, and poised to meet future demand. This is just one of the reasons why we harness the scientific ingenuity of U.S. universities, who have some of the smartest minds in the world, to meet the global challenge to produce more food efficiently with less land and water, improve nutrition, and help families who rely on agriculture to be more resilient in the face of recurrent shocks and challenges. Tackling complex multidimensional challenges like poverty and hunger require multidisciplinary teams with a diversity of expertise, experiences, and perspectives. In fact, innovation, a potent driver of the agri-food system changes that we seek to accomplish in partnership with our target countries, is fed by diversity. Basically, we believe that you, the scientists and innovators of minority serving institutions, are crucial to helping us advance innovation in support of our strategic goals. In fact, this belief is one of the primary motivators for this webinar. Minority serving institutions, including the 1862, 1890, and 1994 land-grant institutions, have a long, rich history of supporting the growth of agricultural productivity and addressing poverty and hunger, both domestically and abroad. We hope that this webinar will inspire you to partner with USAID, Mississippi State University, and the U.S. government Feed the Future initiative to utilize your experience and expertise to contribute to our goals of advancing agriculture-led economic growth, strengthening resilience of people and systems, improving nutritional outcomes, particularly for women and children, and ensuring environmental sustainability for all around the world. Finally, I encourage you all to ask any questions you may have during this webinar and try to identify opportunities to network with other innovators that may help you to develop a strong, well-rounded research consortium. And with that, I turn it back over to Dr. Lawrence and the Fish Innovation Lab team. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cahan. It's a true privilege to work with you, and it is wonderful to have your support today for today's webinar. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about what our goals are for today. And I know several of the attendees today are from 1890 land-grant universities, and you have experience with USDA-funded research. And you have the expertise needed for this USAID-funded activity that is focused on food security. I know other MSI institutions are attending today, and you also have key expertise that can support the success of the Fish Innovation Lab. And you may have experience with other agencies besides USAID. Like many of you, prior to my work with the Fish Innovation Lab, I come from a background of USDA-funded research. Since many of you have similar backgrounds, our goal today is to familiarize you with the Fish Innovation Lab, which is a USAID-funded program. We also want to familiarize you with ways you can engage in the Fish Innovation Lab. And then at the end, we'll provide some of the nitty-gritty details on how the Fish Innovation Lab request for applications works and how you can become involved. And you just heard me mention the request for applications, which was just released yesterday. Hopefully some of you have seen the request for applications that was released. If not, we'll have information about the request for applications included in today's presentation, and you can access that at any time. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background on Feed the Future. So Feed the Future is a multi-agency U.S. government program. But several of the programs funded under the Feed the Future are through the USAID Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security. It supports agricultural development in developing countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and the goal is to address food security and livelihoods, especially addressing hunger and malnutrition in the most vulnerable populations. It especially focuses on smallholder farmers, and for us, fishers as well, particularly using inclusive approaches, including gender equity and approaches that include women. Next slide, please. So the Feed the Future Innovation Labs are the USAID's major funding mechanism for university-led research for agricultural development in Feed the Future countries. Currently, there are 21 innovation labs on different topics. Some of these are commodity-based and some are more cross-cutting theme-based. Each is managed by a U.S. university, and all conduct research for development and engage multiple U.S. and host country and universities in their programs, fostering collaboration and exchange of expertise as they implement. All conduct capacity development as well. This is a key component of what we do. It's not just research, but also developing the capacity of the institutions, especially that we partner with. As a part of our capacity development, we conduct both long-term and short-term trainings, and especially emphasizing the transfer of knowledge leading to the adoption of technologies, especially those developed under research implemented under the Innovation Lab. The Fish Innovation Lab in particular is managed at Mississippi State University under the Global Center for Aquatic Health and Food Security. Next slide, please. So why fish? Why is USAID investing in an innovation lab focused on aquaculture and fisheries? Well, as you can see here, and as many of you are probably aware, fish is a highly nutritious animal source food, provides high quality protein, essential fatty acids. It is also rich in many micronutrients, including vitamin A, D, and B12, and many essential minerals, iron, zinc, calcium, iodine. So it has great potential for addressing malnutrition, especially in vulnerable populations, and especially in women and children for complementary feeding. It's great food for especially stimulating neurodevelopment in children. Globally, it makes up 17% of animal source food intake, but it's even higher in several developing countries. In many of the Feed the Future countries, fish is a preferred animal source food, and many of these countries are fish loving, and so it's ingrained and part of the culture. And in addition to that, it's a great source of livelihoods. It also happens to be one of the most traded food commodities in the world. And for livelihoods in the agricultural sector, it's especially important for many developing countries. Next slide, please. So the Fish Innovation Lab implemented its first phase at Mississippi State University from 2018 to 2023. So the program has been extended by USAID, so we're in the beginning stages of phase 2, which will run from 2023 to 2028. The Fish Innovation Lab's research portfolio is primarily built from a competitive RFA-driven process. The request for applications that I mentioned that was released yesterday is the starting point for building that portfolio. And so what we're showing here are the Fish Innovation Lab's 3 main impact pathways that we will operate under in phase 2. So just to quickly go over these impact pathways, the first impact pathway we will operate under is what you would classically think about with an innovation lab, and that's production. Okay, but when we're talking about aquaculture production, we also want to think about sustainable approaches, and we also want to think about implementing climate smart approaches. Okay, but it's not only aquaculture. The Fish Innovation Lab also covers wild fisheries harvest. So in the area of sustainable fisheries, we're talking a lot of times about sustainable harvest. And so working with our local fishers to develop methods for sustainable fishing and utilizing sustainable fishing approaches. The second major impact pathway is in nutrition and food systems. And so this includes, under the purview of the Fish Innovation Lab, we work not only on the producer side of the value chain, but we also work on the consumer side. So we implement projects focused on consumer access to fish as a highly nutritious food source, especially looking at those most vulnerable populations, again, women and children, especially in the first 2 years of life as a great source of complementary food. But it also includes food safety, which is an important component of nutrition, and also social inclusion in fish value chains as well. Our third impact pathway is inclusive access to improved inputs. And so these are the inputs into the aquaculture value chain. As we all know, feed is often one of the major limiting factors to access that restricts access and livelihoods in aquaculture in that particular sector. So access to high quality, affordable feed is one of our important inputs that we work on, but also access to the seed stocks and the brood stocks to supply the fish for aquaculture, and access to highly quality genetic stocks as well. So genetic improvement and access to those genetic stocks is also important to us as well. But as we're all aware also, one of the major limitations that restricts the growth oftentimes in aquaculture is disease and other causes of pre-harvest loss. And so the access to those inputs to address fish disease and those limitations, such as vaccines and approaches for good husbandry, are an important part of what we do as well. So those are the three major impact pathways, and all research projects must fit under one of those, at least one of those impact pathways. Next slide, please. So development research also under the Fish Innovation Lab must incorporate the three cross-cutting themes. And so all of our projects must also address these three cross-cutting themes. So the cross-cutting themes for the Fish Innovation Lab include gender and social inclusion. So all projects must utilize approaches that are inclusive, especially to ensure equivalent and access for women, but also they must incorporate as an integrated part of the project capacity development. And so it's a blend of applied research plus capacity development, but all projects must also address and support resilient approaches. So as we're all aware, one of the things we want to avoid as we implement projects are those man-made or natural occurrences that can completely wipe out the progress. And so we want to instill resilience as we're implementing our research projects so that the impacts that we're achieving can have long-lasting effects and won't be eliminated by those natural or man-made instances that can wipe out all the progress that we've made. Next slide, please. And so international development work operates under a theory of change. And so some of you may be familiar with hypothesis-driven research, but when we're talking about international development research, we're not talking about hypothesis-driven research. We're operating under a theory of change. And so the Fish Innovation Lab has a theory of change that we operate under, and all of the research projects that we fund must operate under and support this theory of change. And so the theory of change for the Fish Innovation Lab is graphically represented here. Our three approaches are research for development, capacity development, and adoption, so transfer of technologies into the hands of our end users. So we are responsible not only for the development and adaptation of technologies, but the handoff of those technologies to our end users. So adoption of innovations and scaling those innovations within the value chain where we're working. Our three impact pathways, which I've just talked about, are climate smart aquatic and system innovations, nutrition and food systems, and inclusive access to those inputs. All must incorporate the three cost-cutting themes of gender and social inclusion, capacity development, and resilience. And all that is to achieve our goals, ultimately, increase productivity, improve resilience and livelihoods, inclusive market access, food security, addressing malnutrition and food access, equitable livelihoods are improved, and also responsible aquatic resource management. That applies not only in the aquaculture side, but in the fisheries side as well. Next slide, please. So in phase 2, again, which runs from 2023 to 2028, this is a look at the countries where we will be implementing. And so this is in the request for applications, but just to give you a quick overview of those countries. So the Fish Innovation Lab has identified 4 primary focus countries where we will be implementing. And if you look at our request for application, each of these countries has a list of priorities that we have already identified for these 4 countries. These 4 countries in Africa are Nigeria, Kenya, and Zambia, and in Asia, Bangladesh. Now, we also have several high priority countries where you can also propose to do work in these high priority countries as well. In West Africa, this includes Senegal, Ghana, East Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, Madagascar, and in Asia, Nepal. Next slide, please. So that's an overview to help you. Hopefully this is giving you an understanding of the Fish Innovation Lab, how it fits in under the Feed the Future program. Now, looking forward, I want to give you some tips and advice on working with USAID. Next slide, please. And so I want to cover a few topics on working with USAID that may be a little bit different if you have prior experience with USDA or other funding mechanisms. Again, just to emphasize, what we're talking about here is research for development. So these are all research projects, but this is differentiated from other traditional development work, which may be supplying of goods or other things like that. This is clearly research, but it is not hypothesis-driven basic research whose aim is to achieve publications. This is very applied and it must be end-user focused. It also must result in the adoption of new technologies or improved practices. And so when we say new technologies and improved practices, that does not always mean a brand new technology. Many of the technologies and innovations that we implemented in the previous 5 years were not brand new. We're talking about technologies like rice fish technology or black soldier fly larvae production. These are not brand new technologies. However, in the context of one of the countries where we're implementing, for example, Nigeria, these technologies have not been adapted to that local context. So the research can be taking a technology and adapting it to a local concept and to a local context. And so hopefully this gives you an idea of the type of research we're looking for. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, all of these research projects are working on new innovations, either brand new innovations or innovations that are new in a local context. What we're showing here is a summary at the end of our 5 years. These are all of the technologies that were developed by the 24 projects that were implemented under phase 1 of the Fish Innovation Lab. And so there were 58 technologies or improved practices that were implemented over that 5 years, and they are in varying phases of implementation. But the point is, all the research project developed or improved technologies and handed these off into the hands of end users. Next slide, please. Another feature that some of you may not be used to is the level of reporting. So there is a lot of hands-on and maybe a different level of reporting. So the management entity here at Mississippi State University will be conducting quarterly reporting. And so we will be working with you and monitoring your activity and supporting your activities. USAID requires semi-annual reporting. So we have to supply formal reports to USAID on a semi-annual basis. So we will be collecting that information from our projects. And in addition to the programmatic and financial reporting that you may be used to with other funding mechanisms, USAID has an additional reporting that is monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and that's tracking indicators. So that includes setting targets for indicators and reporting those indicators to us as a management entity, which then we report to USAID. So to give you a little bit more information on what MEL indicator reporting is, I'll show you what we did in the previous 5 years. Next slide, please. And so this is a summary of some of the MEL indicators that our 24 teams, this is a summary of what our 24 teams accomplished in the previous 5 years. And so this is the type of indicator reporting we're talking about. So it's not, one of the indicators, as I showed you previously, is the number of technologies that each team developed and what phase they are in, but also short-term trainings, the number of individuals that participated in short-term trainings or engaged in food security programs. And so these are numbers that were counted by our individual activities in the previous 5 years. And this is a summary of what they accomplished. All of this, as you can see, is disaggregated so that we collect the number of male and female participants. The number of individuals, a very important indicator to us is the number of individuals who have applied technologies or practices that come out of the project. And so because this is research for development and we're interested in handoff and adoption, this is a key component, is the number of individuals that apply the technologies that come out of these programs. And so, but another important part and a unique aspect of Innovation Labs is our capacity to do long-term trainings. And so these are the number of graduate students that were trained under the previous 5 years. And so I'm very proud of this number, 37 students trained during the previous 5 years over these 24 projects. We strongly encourage graduate student trainings to occur at the host country institutions in the country where they're working so they can have hands-on engagement with these activities. Training students at the host country institution also supports the institutional capacity in our host country institutions and helps us achieve our long-term goals of improving the long-term capacity in the host countries where we're working. So this gives you an idea of what indicators are and what we track. And if you are funded under the Fish Innovation Lab, you will be responsible for tracking and reporting on these indicators. In phase 2, the MEL indicators have been adjusted somewhat. And so, but the other thing about the management entity here at Mississippi State University is, if you're not familiar with this, we support you and train you on how to set targets and how to count these numbers, so you're not working on this in a vacuum or alone. Next slide, please. So another interesting aspect about working with USAID, obviously you work with Mississippi State University and the Fish Innovation Lab management entity. We serve as that interface between your project and USAID. So we select and manage the projects, and so you work with us, and then we report to USAID, and we facilitate and serve as that interface between the activities and USAID. We're also responsible for collecting all the data from your research, your monitor and evaluation indicator data, and we report that to USAID. We also conduct a fair number of meetings, and so if you're funded through this program, we will expect you to attend in person or have a representative attend our annual meetings. We also conduct quarterly virtual meetings, and we anticipate conducting at least one regional meeting in the different regions where we're implementing. And so you'd be responsible for attending the one that's relevant to you over the life of your activity. Next slide, please. And one other unique aspect about USAID, these are integrated projects. And so each one must include a host country institution. So you must partner with a host country institution. And so it is a partnership, and you must also incorporate capacity development in with your research. And again, that goes hand in hand with the transfer of your technologies into the hands of the end users. And you must include gender and social inclusion approaches and consider strategies to strengthen resilience. Next slide, please. So before I wrap up, I just want to give you a few examples of some of the approaches used by our teams in phase 1 that were successful and can help you think about as you design your potential research project to submit for our request for applications. One approach that we found was highly successful is community-based participatory research. For example, our rice fish farming project in Nigeria conducted their research not at the university, not at university in university rice fish farms. These projects were conducted in the communities in 2 different states in Nigeria, and these were done, and the resources conducted on the farms under actual production conditions, and the community members were involved in the data collection. So is the data as clean as it would be? It's not. It's a little bit more messy, but you identify real world problems. And so they identified, okay, one of the issues we're going to deal with is leakage from these trenches. And we're going to have to deal with, okay, how are the farmers going to have access to the fish to stock into these ponds? So new problems emerged they had to address, but it also achieves that community buy-in. So the communities were engaged. They bought into the technology, and by the end of the project, they were excited about this approach and were looking forward to continuing this research beyond the life of the project. Next slide, please. Stakeholder engagement through workshops, and so this is a critical piece, working directly with the stakeholders. And so the example I give here is a sperm cryopreservation technology that was developed in Bangladesh. So this research team developed and optimized the techniques for 6 different carp species that are relevant to aquaculture in Bangladesh. They developed that technology, but the researcher here, Dr. Sardar at Bangladesh Agricultural University, very much a university researcher, very accomplished scientist in research methods, but he got outside of his comfort zone and he conducted many workshops, went to the nurseries, went to the hatchery owners, organized these workshops. These were conducted in the districts where the nurseries and the farmers are located, and taught them these techniques and got their buy-in. And they, as a follow-up to these workshops, after they understood the technology, they were able to conduct some of their research and get data from the hatcheries to look at what the impacts were under production conditions. So working with the stakeholders through workshops like this can also be a very successful approach. Next slide, please. Capacity development through engagement with universities, farmer cooperatives, or fishery community organizations, beach management units. The example I give here is the citizen science approach implemented in Cambodia by one of our teams, where they engaged, again, they engaged the fishers in the data collection, but they worked with the local fishery organizations. So they took ownership of the segment of the river, and they understood, once they understood the principles of sustainable fisheries management, they bought in. They started policing their segment of the river. They set aside areas that are designated as protected areas where they wouldn't fish as a community to protect the breeding of the fish. And so working directly with the communities in the capacity development, be it the university or other farmer cooperatives or fisher cooperatives, is another very successful approach. Next slide, please. And of course, long-term capacity development, innovation labs, because we are led by universities, we have tremendous potential for long-term capacity development, training of students. Again, this is strongly encouraged to occur at the host country institutions. And so the example I give here was an aquaculture biosecurity project conducted in Nigeria. They collected data from the ponds, but then they took it back and conducted an epidemiological analysis. But this analysis was done by 2 master's students trained in veterinary public health degrees at the University of Ibadan. Again, transferring that capacity to the long-term building of expertise in Nigeria is a critical piece that we're looking for in these projects as well. Next. And finally, collaboration with government stakeholders. Oftentimes, the stakeholder may not be the farmers or fishers. We may be looking to inform policymakers. So the example I give here is a food safety project that was conducted in Bangladesh. This project worked hand in hand with the Bangladesh Food Safety Authority throughout their implementation. So as they gather data on the pathogens that they isolated from processors and from farms in the value chain of aquaculture in Bangladesh, they worked very closely with the Food Safety Authority to transfer this information to them so that they can establish baselines to inform the policy for Bangladesh to support and improved food safety of the fish value chain in Bangladesh. They also conducted capacity development with the Department of Fisheries and the National Food Safety Laboratory. So they not only conducted the data collection at ICDDRB, the institution that managed this, but they also trained the government workers, and they got very positive feedback from the participants from these agencies. So it's oftentimes working hand in hand with government stakeholders and being aware of the relevant agencies and working hand in hand with them to inform policy can be another important successful strategy. Next slide, please. And I hope that has been helpful for you. That's just a flavor of some of the unique aspects of Fish Innovation Lab research, and also some of the successful approaches that we have seen and that we recommend for you, and some things for you to think about. But again, one of the things we're looking for is fresh ideas, and we're excited about you being here and your interest in the program. Now I will turn it over to Macy Smith, who is our Fish Innovation Lab program manager, who will present the rest of our webinar and get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. Next slide. Now that you know a little bit more about the Fish Innovation Lab, I want to identify some key ways that the Fish Innovation Lab advances and promotes MSI opportunities through our request for application process. Our lab released our RFA as of yesterday, April 15th, 2024. This RFA provides opportunities related to our areas of inquiry, as described by Dr. Lawrence, with a ceiling of $500,000. This opportunity allows for you to be an integral part of our work in a variety of ways. Because our projects synergize activities across teams that may be from host countries and the U.S., you're able to seek out and collaborate on activities, firstly, as a principal investigator at a U.S.-based institution. You could also serve as a co-PI working with another U.S. PI and host country PI. Note that the lead institution can be in the U.S. or the host country, and the lead PI is the PI from that lead institution. We understand that if you're newer to USAID and extramural funding opportunities, the idea of identifying a team and putting together an application within a month can seem challenging. If you align with any of our research areas and find that this is an opportunity for you, but you don't have a research team, please reach out to our email address with your interest, and there's potential for us to identify fit within potential teams. Though this is not a guarantee, we will certainly keep you on our radar as a key personnel within your self-expressed subject matter expertise. Next slide. We want to provide every opportunity for MSIs to collaborate. Research shows that there can sometimes be hesitation from MSIs due to cost-sharing requirements for extramural funding. We, as a management entity, have therefore removed this wording from our RFA in an effort to placate any concerns associated with cost sharing. We do want to emphasize that although this is not required, it is indicative of local investment that outlives the life of the project and a strategy for handoff. Ultimately, cost sharing oftentimes lead to more sustainable impact. If you have any questions about this during your application process and how this could possibly add value to your application, please reach out with any questions. Next slide. Just as you're interested in how you can contribute to the Fish Innovation Lab as a key personnel, we're also aware that your institution is interested in how it is eligible for this funding opportunity. Some specific requirements include each research, educational, government, private sector, or nonprofit institution globally that should have a unique entity ID and is registered in the system for award management. You may have previously heard this referred to as a DUNS. Additionally, one primary institution will be responsible for implementing the activity, monitoring progress, ensuring compliance with MSU and USAID rules and guidelines, managing funds appropriately, collating and presenting results, and submitting progress and final reports. All of our communication will flow from our email account and directly to the lead PI, who is responsible for disseminating information appropriately. Additionally, each team must have a host country primary institution, which is a university or other qualified organization that will coordinate all activities in the host country, including execution of appropriate agreements with collaborating local partners, if there are any. Next slide. The primary institution, and therefore the lead PI, is responsible for guiding the project team through the process and is ultimately the communicator and coordinator of all information between the project team and the management entity. During the pre-award phase, this communication includes the submission of the concept note, a full proposal upon invitation, and co-creation upon contingent selection. Post-award, this includes leading and implementing the activity, ensuring incorporation of cross-cutting themes, and submitting data and reports on time. It is imperative that the lead institution and lead PI consider the time and effort of their commitment and plan accordingly. Next slide. One key planning aspect is in consideration of reporting. Our most successful projects from phase 1 are those who started with the end in mind and created clear paths for project success. Reporting is a requirement of USAID. As the management entity, we require 4 types of reports: quarterly, semi-annual, annual, and final. This information will be collected through Pi-Star. Projects are also required to respond to questions on reporting. Therefore, we highly encourage applicant projects to add the time and effort into their project timelines and account for reporting. In phase 2, all reporting will be coordinated and entered by the lead PI. The ME will provide training and support along the way. Next slide. In an effort to promote opportunities and inclusive of all institutions, the Fish Innovation Lab will house the following resources available on the current opportunities page of the Fish Innovation Lab website. This includes key dates and timelines table, concept note template, budget template, MSI engagement webinar recording and slides, and Q&A submission and response opportunity. I want to take a moment to detail each of these. Next slide. Yesterday, we released the RFA. In looking across the next quarter or 3 months from mid-April to mid or late June, the following dates are of key importance. We can see the deadline for submission of written responses on April 24th, 2024, posting of responses to written questions on May 3rd, 2024, the deadline for submission of concept notes on May 15th, 2024, invitations for full proposals on June 5th, 2024, informational webinar for invited full teams on June 12th, and then the deadline for submission on July 2024. Next slide. The next few slides detail the concept note template. Before I go into detail, I want to highlight a few key aspects of the concept note template, how it can be used, and also related concept note compliance checklist details that can also be found in Pi-Star. The impetus behind the concept note template is to provide insight into phase 1 project successes and how their approaches to the solicitation process enabled them to successfully convey their research aims and ultimately be selected as a Fish Innovation Lab project. This is best realized by identifying what the concept note is not intended for. Firstly, this template is not prescriptive. The sections that I describe are one way to effectively organize and capture information that contribute to the successful articulation of your project's outputs, outcomes, and overall impact. This template is also not intended to use with the RFA concept note formatting compliance checklist. It is in the best interest of the project team to read through the checklist and determine concept note formatting and ensure that your document matches those requirements and expectations. There are no word counts included in these sections. This is because certain sections can be infused or integrated with others. Ultimately, the design of the concept note template may vary based on the experience of the project team and lead PI, the project team's familiarity with USAID, and the idea for a possible outline for the concept note template. For seasoned PIs and those familiar with USAID, it may suffice to read the RFA, the requirements, the evaluation criteria, and then develop your own template. Note that each project must submit one concept note in PyStar and fill out the general submission information included in the RFA portal. The first part of each concept note is the cover page. The cover page should include the header information, descriptive activity title, the duration of the activity referred to as period of performance, the total budget requested, and the relevant AIs. Next slide. Additionally, the cover page should also include the country of interest, key personnel names and contact information, and whether or not the activity includes a minority serving institute, as well as the specifics on key personnel from that institute and his or her contact information. Next slide. The concept note itself should include, but is not limited to, the problem statement, activity goals, approach, projected outputs, projected outcomes. These should be conveyed clearly and concisely, especially in the concept note due to the 4-page restriction. Next slide. The concept note should also incorporate key information relevant to the Fish Innovation Lab RFA. This includes, but isn't limited to, the Fish Innovation Lab theory of change, the U.S. government global food security research strategy, cross-cutting theme alignment, feed the future country plan relevance, priority country, and zone of influence. Next slide. The concept note should also consider its research approach and methods and development impacts. Specifically, the project team should consider who are the project priority groups and how are they engaged through, in, and with this project. You will see language in the RFA about the next user and end user. Please keep this in mind as you develop your proposal and consider what implications this has on these groups. Note counted in the page limit are the possibility to incorporate your activity timeline, references, and the attachment of your budget and budget narrative and key personnel CVs. Please note that these attachments will be enabled in PyStar. So those will be separate attachments and not included in the word count. Next slide. This has been a significant amount of information in a short amount of time, so I appreciate that I met many of you at the 1890s conference in Nashville this past week, and many of you through email and outreach in weeks prior. I want to take this time to thank you personally and from our entire team here at the Fish Innovation Lab for spending your time with us today. We greatly appreciate your support, and we want to express our deepest gratitude for your contributions. As the management entity, we strive to learn from your feedback because it is our goal to enable and empower equitable opportunities for both our applicants and our project end users. I want to pass it back over to Dr. Stephen Reichley now for some additional remarks as we open up the floor for feedback and questions.
Thank you so much, Macy, and thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Cahan, for your contributions to the webinar today and the presentations. Really appreciate that. And a big thanks to all of you again for attending the webinar and being here with us today. Just a couple of things before we get into the question and answer phase of the webinar. I want to remind everybody to recognize that we may not be able to get to all the questions today. And so if we don't get to all the questions today, if your question isn't answered or if you have additional questions, please submit those to the Fish Innovation Lab email by 5 p.m. Eastern on April 24th. So any of the questions that unanswered questions from today will get incorporated into that. And the answers will be posted to the Fish Innovation Lab website on May 3rd. So just recognize that too. If we don't get to your question or if you have other questions, please make sure they get submitted by that April 24th deadline, and the answers will be posted on our website by May 3rd. I'd also like to just point you to the Fish Innovation Lab website. As Macy mentioned, this was a lot of information here today. So our Fish Innovation Lab website has all the RFA documents and all the supporting information on there. So just please take note of that, and it's a great resource for you to have to go to answer all the questions there. So please, that just got posted in the chat. So please note that down and perhaps bookmark it so you have that and can easily reference that into the future. We're also going to be sharing a quick post event survey from the webinar today. So if you could please take a moment to complete that survey, that will help us tremendously as we make sure that we're doing the best we can to for all the needs that you have and doing everything that we can. So with that, again, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks everyone for the great questions that people are putting into the Q&A function. If you haven't done that and you have a question, go down to the bottom of the screen and Q&A, and feel free to put your question in there. And again, as a reminder, if we may not be able to get to all of them today, if not, please send those via email if your question isn't answered. So with that, I am going to ask Dr. Lawrence to come back with us. There he is. Dr. Lawrence, thanks for that. We'll go through some of the questions that have been submitted during the webinar today. So first question, Dr. Lawrence, is the resources that we shared in the PowerPoint of what will be listed there. When will those be posted and where?
Great question. So most of the items are already posted on our website, and we will be adding the recording of this webinar in the coming days. The answers to the questions submitted to the Fish Innovation Lab by April 24th will be posted on our website by May 3rd. So hopefully that answers your question. And
great. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence, for that. Yep. So again, all that information, as we mentioned before, and the link was in the chat to the website. Go to the website, and if it's not already there, it'll be there soon. So the next question we have, Dr. Lawrence, looks like a couple of questions regarding the cross-cutting themes. And so the first question that was asked regarding cross-cutting themes is, do we have to have all three of the cross-cutting themes, or can we pick one to focus on?
okay, yeah, that's a good question. So each project is responsible for implementation of all three cross-cutting themes. Now, that being said, the degree or the depth of implementing the three cross-cutting themes can vary from project to project. And so, for example, a project focused on aquaculture biosecurity, resilience is a natural part of that. But the other, but cross-cutting themes such as gender and social inclusion, all projects should consider that. And all projects should also conduct capacity development as an important part of what they do. An application must consider ways to address these issues and as they in their plan for implementation and as they go forward. Next.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence, for that. Next question, still sticking with the cross-cutting themes. For those themes that you mentioned, do you require experts from those themes in the concept note or proposal?
Right. This is a great question. And the answer is no. This expertise is not required as part of the implementation team. We recognize that trying to include an expert in each cross-cutting theme can make your team very unwieldy. So the Fish Innovation Lab management entity has cross-cutting theme specialists. And so if your concept note turns into a proposal and it gets selected for funding, these cross-cutting theme specialists can provide feedback on your proposed plans corresponding to each of those cross-cutting themes and provide expertise and support to the activities. So we recognize that these cross-cutting themes may not fall directly under your team's area of expertise, but the management entity has specialists and can provide that support for you. So in the interest of not having your teams become too unwieldy and burdensome, and also in recognition of your budget, it is not required. And so the management entity can provide that support as needed. And if you have questions as you're implementing in these cross-cutting themes, the specialists are there also to provide that support.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence, for the answer to that question. We're going to shift gears a little bit here. Someone has a question asking about if they could submit more than one application.
So an individual can be a PI on one concept note. Now, a PI can also serve in another capacity on another concept note, but each individual should be a PI on only one concept note.
Great. Thanks for the clarification on that. Someone was asking if they send us a question via email, will you answer them directly and post the response online, or will you just post the response online?
So an important part of this RFA process is we want to maintain a fair, competitive process. And so that information is made available to everybody on a fair basis, and to maintain a fair, competitive process, questions that are sent in by email should all be submitted by April 24th. And then all those answers will be posted to our website. And so we will not answer directly to an email, but all those questions will be answered and posted publicly on our website.
Great, thank you so much. The next question has to do with funding, particularly for foreign institutions. So what percentage of funding can be allocated to a co-principal investigator or co-PI from a foreign institution?
Right. And so there is a requirement in the RFA. And so if you look at our RFA, I'm sure you will see this. At least 50% of the total budget amount must be spent in the host country. And so that is another important consideration to take in mind as you are identifying your partner and developing your budget.
Great, thanks. Someone else is asking, is it possible for the host country to be the lead institution?
Yes, that is possible. We, as a management entity, one of the things we try to do is allow the teams the flexibility to design their project structure as it works best for their particular project. And so we had examples in our phase 1 of implementation where the project lead institution was in the US. It was a US university, but we had all the other examples where the host country organization was the lead institution, either a host country university or a host country organization. And so to give the most flexibility to the teams to help you set up the project, to help you achieve success, we give you that flexibility so that you can, within your team, you can identify what the lead institution is. But that is an important consideration because that lead institution, as Macy talked about in the webinar, that lead institution is the one that we will be primarily communicating with, and also will be the primarily responsible for collecting the information and data and reporting back to the management entity. So it is an important question, but we do give your team the flexibility to identify how it works best for your team and to identify what makes sense for the lead organization to be.
Great, thanks for that clarification. The next question, is it compulsory to have the co-PI, especially from the country of interest, in the concept note that is due in May 15th?
So, yes, all concept notes, as we mentioned, must include a host country institution and have a PI identified in the host country side. So, yes, you should have your team fully formulated at the time of your concept note, and because it's a critical part of that proposal development, which will follow on immediately after the concept note to have your team formulated. Yes, you should include your host country institution by that concept note stage.
Great. And a related question, is it a must to partner with a U.S. institution?
So each research activity is required to have a host country institution. And we have seen in very practical terms, it is critical to the success of activities to have a host country institution. In our previous phase, if you look at our dates of implementation, you can tell our phase 1 was hugely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The way we achieved success in those activities is that our activities had to pivot to that circumstance because many of them were actually launching in 2020 as the COVID epidemic was progressing. And as things progressively shut down, our teams pivoted to greater reliance on those host country institutions. And of course, it's also critical to have a host country institution for our long-term success. So that is critical and why we require a host country institution. However, we strongly encourage a U.S. institution as well. It is not a requirement. However, one of the things we want to do is foster those collaborations between U.S. and host country institutions. That's one of our long-term strategies, is to build those long-term collaborations. We're hoping that these partnerships that you're fostering will end up being a long-term collaboration. We're also looking for that two-way transfer of knowledge, and we do look at it as two-way. It's not just U.S. knowledge being transferred to the host country, but oftentimes we always see this, the U.S. PIs and the U.S. teams learn a lot from our host country institutions as well. And so that's a very valuable part of that team structure. And so it is a requirement to have a host country institution and strongly encourage. And so we will favorably review those that include a partnership between a U.S. and a host country institution. Hopefully that explains and makes sense.
Great, thank you so much. There's a question asking if does it make us more competitive if we select more than one area of inquiry?
Okay. Yeah. Very good question. Not necessarily. And actually it's similar to if you have submitted proposals to other agencies or been a reviewer on other panels. Oftentimes you see those proposals where they're trying to do too much or it's not or it lacks focus. And so our suggestion is to not try to make yourself more competitive by trying to address all three areas of inquiry. We would rather see a very strong, focused concept note that's able to showcase its capacity to become a robust research for development proposal. And so supported by a reliable team to implement those proposed activities. So if you focus on one area of inquiry and do it really well, and that proposal is going to probably be reviewed more favorably than one that we may lack confidence that they're going to be able to accomplish everything they're saying they can do, or lacks as much focus because they're trying to cover all the areas of inquiry. And so if it is now, oftentimes it is within the normal scope of that project's plan for implementation that they will have elements in more than one, two, or three areas of inquiry. And sometimes two may be almost equal. And so that's okay. As long as it is a natural fit, our recommendation is to design your research for development project to address the question and the problem you're trying to, and not try to artificially try to address all three areas of inquiry. If you fit under just one area of inquiry and have a really strong concept, that will be reviewed just as favorably as one that naturally fits under two or three areas of inquiry. The importance is fitting under at least one, which ensures you'll be under our theory of change. Of course, the other important consideration is that each one should address all three of the cross-cutting themes and support the overall Fish Innovation Lab's goals as stated in our theory of change. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarification on that. Next question that we have, do you support the purchase of equipment?
Okay, now yes, it is allowable. There are guidelines and there are limitations that are set by USAID. And so in particular, this is under the details of 2 CFR 200.439. And so we'll post that so you can have that information. And so we will post the answers to these questions so you can have that information. But there are restrictions and limitations and guidelines to follow. It is allowable as long as it's approved and you follow those limitations and guidelines.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question for you, are there specific numbers of partner organizations that are required?
Okay, good question. So obviously each one must have one host country institution, strongly encouraged to have a US partner. So at least two. Now, it is allowable to have more than two, and I would say whatever works for helping your particular project achieve its highest probability of success. Whatever makes sense for that. I would not recommend adding partner organizations other than what would help you set you up for the highest probability of success. If you very practical considerations are, as you add more institutions, your budget for each institution becomes more restricted. And so in terms of our review, we have no preference on that. However, I would say if it does look like, there is a lack of focus or too small of a budget, a lot of institutions and too little budget going to each institution, we may have questions about the feasibility and your likelihood of accomplishing what you're setting out to do. But if you have, good justification for each of those organizations, I would just, the strong recommendations is for 2. Any beyond that is allowable, but just make sure that each of those is essential for helping you achieve your success and what makes sense to incorporate all the expertise that you need to achieve successful implementation.
Great, thanks. The next question that we have is asking if you can elaborate more about the unique entity ID and registration in SAM.
Yes. So, if you're at a US university, your institution is almost assuredly going to have a UEI already. The UEI is the Unique Entity Identification Number. You may be familiar with the former name was the DUNS number. And so for any institution to receive US federal funds, they must have a UEI number, which used to be called the DUNS number. And so now, if you're at a US institution, most assuredly your institution will have one of these. The question is, your host country, partner country may or may not. A lot of them do, but that is an important consideration. It's not a deciding factor in whether that institution, whether you should partner, but you should check with them on whether they have one. And if they do not, you need to encourage them, because although they will not be required to have one at the concept note phase, they will be required to have one at the full proposal stage. And so it takes some time to get a UEI number. So an important consideration is to make sure all the institutions that are involved have a UEI number. And so if it's not there by the concept note stage, you're still allowed to submit, but you need to make sure that that is in place by the time of the full proposal. The SAM registration website information is provided in the request for applications and also on our website. So there you can find information for that in our RFA and on our website.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lawrence. The next question, someone is asking, will you ever have projects in the Caribbean or Latin America?
Okay, good question. So for this phase from 2023 to 2028, we will not have projects funded in the Caribbean or Latin America during this phase. And this is primarily because in the Feed the Future countries that are in Latin America, aquaculture and fisheries are not part of their priority value chains at the current time. Now, this could change in the future, but in the currently right now, that is where we are. But so during this phase, we will not have projects in the Caribbean or Latin America, but could change in the future depending on the USAID missions in Feed the Future countries, who are they have the primary responsibility for establishing the priorities for USAID funded activities in those countries. Thank you.
Great, thanks. The next, I guess, question or statement is that the description of MSI is not clear. So maybe if you can provide a little bit more information on what MSI or Minority Serving Institution is.
Okay. So in our RFA document, we include information about MSI eligibility based on 2023 data from the U.S. Department of Education. So it includes institutions that qualify for MSI funding, have an open MSI grant, and those receiving MSI funding. And so we will provide website information for MSIs that are included in these categories in our response to this question. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. Really appreciate your time and patience going through the questions that everybody asked. Thank you all of the attendees for the wonderful questions and the insightful questions there. Again, so thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence. This concludes the end of our question and answer phase of the webinar. So thank you, Dr. Lawrence, for that. A reminder to all of the attendees, again, if you think of other questions or your question was inadvertently missed while we were going through those, please make sure that you have the opportunity to email those questions to the Fish Innovation Lab email address that is in the chat and also in the RFA document and on the website. Those questions need to be submitted to the Fish Innovation Lab email by 5 p.m. Eastern on April 24th. And then the answers to those questions will be posted on the website by May 3rd. So again, make sure you submit those questions by 5 p.m. Eastern on April 24th. Also want to remind you again that the Fish Innovation Lab website, again, the link was just put into the chat, has the RFA document as well as all the related documents that we've talked about here today. So go to that website. That's a great resource. I encourage you to click on the link now while you're in the webinar and add that bookmark to your web browser so you have that for ease of access. And then finally, again, another reminder, we ask you to please complete this post-event survey. So the link just went into the chat. So if you could please take a moment to click on that link and answer the questions. It's a very short survey, but it's just, again, a fantastic way for us to make sure that that we have the information that we need to best serve you. So we appreciate your time and effort in completing that very short survey. With that, that concludes the webinar for today. Again, a big thank you to Dr. Cahan for joining us and providing excellent remarks in the webinar today. Thanks to Dr. Lawrence, thanks to Macy for all of their information that they shared. I'd also like to thank the rest of the Fish Innovation Lab management entity who have been working behind the scenes to make this presentation go very smoothly and make sure we address all the questions and answers. So a big thank you to them as well. And then thank you for everybody taking their time out of their day to join us for the webinar. We greatly appreciate it. We look forward to receiving your concept notes and working with you in the future. So thanks again and have a wonderful rest of your day.